They told me old men don't need dreams. They told me the Grand Canyon was for postcards, not for me. And when I said I wanted to see it before I died, they smiled and said, "You'll be gone soon enough, Dad. Save your breath." That was the first cut, the kind that doesn't bleed, just burrows deep. I carried the dream for 70 years. Ever since I was a boy, flipping through dusty books at the town library, staring at photographs of that impossible scar in the earth. My wife had wanted to see it too. We promised each other, one day, but one day turned into decades. Work, bills, children, responsibilities. Always later. Until later ran out for her, and I was left behind, still holding the promise. So when my family said they were driving to the canyon for summer vacation, I thought, finally, they'll let me come. Finally, I'll keep my word to her, and to the boy I used to be. Instead, I got silence. Half answers. My son, Peter, muttering about miles of walking and Dad slowing us down. My daughter-in-law Claire shaking her head, saying the trip was already planned. My grandson Ethan, smirking, Grand Canyon's overrated. Google Earth's free. But I still packed a suitcase. Just in case. The morning they left, I stood on the porch in Flagstaff, suitcase at my feet, hat in my hands, and watched their SUV disappear down the road. They hadn't even told me goodbye. The house behind me was too quiet. The roses my wife planted along the walkway had wilted in the heat. A cicada droned in the pecan tree. I felt my chest hollow out, like someone had scooped the air right out of me. Then, 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. Claire's message lit up the screen. "We decided you can come after all. Be ready in 10 minutes. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the suitcase, locked the door, and stood on the curb as their SUV swung back around. They pulled up with their windows rolled tight, and their smiles stretched like elastic. My son muttered, "Come on, Dad. Let's get this over with." I slid into the back seat. The upholstery was hot, sticky. My grandson sat beside me, earbuds jammed in. My granddaughter scrolled on her phone without looking up. No one asked how I was feeling. No one asked why my shirt was damp from standing in the sun. The desert highway unrolled in silence. Dust devils twisted across the flats. I tried to speak once, told them about the first time I came to Arizona, back when Route 66 still meant something. My words hit the glass of the windshield and fell flat. 2 hours later, we pulled into the national park. Cars lined the lots. Children laughed. The air hummed with excitement. I pressed my face to the glass, hoping for a glimpse of the canyon, a sliver of that endless horizon. "Dad, wait here," Peter said, shifting into park. "What do you mean, wait? You'll slow us down. We just want to grab a few pictures. Back in an hour, tops." Claire leaned over her shoulder. "Be a dear and stay put. We'll bring you a souvenir from the gift shop." Before I could argue, the doors slammed. Their shadows disappeared into the crowd. At first, I thought they were joking, that they'd come back in a minute, laughing. But the sun rose higher. The car turned into an oven. My collar stuck to my neck. My breaths came shorter, tighter. I tried the door. Locked. The air was heavy, a fist around my throat. Sweat burned my eyes. My chest ached. I pressed my palm against the window, mouthing words no one cared to hear. Tourists passed, laughing, maps flapping in their hands. Not one looked inside. The canyon was there, just 100 yards away. The dream of a lifetime, within reach. And I was trapped like an animal, melting behind glass. I thought of her, my wife, standing at the edge with me, wind in her hair. I whispered her name. Dark spots swam in my vision. My fingers trembled. My head slumped back. For a moment, I wondered if this was it. If this was how my story ended. In a locked car, discarded by the very people I had raised. Then, knuckles rapped against the glass. A shadow. A ranger's hat tilted against the sun. His face sharp with alarm. "Sir? Can you hear me? Hold on." The last thing I saw before blackness swept me under was his walkie-talkie, snapping to life. When I woke again, it wasn't the canyon I saw. It was a sterile clinic ceiling, water pressed to my lips, and 4 dripping into my arm. The ranger stood at the foot of the bed, hat tucked to his chest. "You almost didn't make it," he said quietly. I turned my head, searching for my family. The chairs were empty. They hadn't come back. They hadn't even asked. Something inside me shifted then. Not a crack. No, a sharpening. The canyon wasn't the only thing with an edge. They wanted me gone. They wanted me silent. They wanted me erased. They failed. And now it was my turn. The nurse told me to rest. To drink fluids, avoid the sun, take it easy. But how do you rest after learning the people you raised would rather see you boil alive than share a view with you? When I stepped outside the small park clinic that evening, the sky was glowing orange. Families strolled past, laughing, clutching souvenirs, holding hands sticky with ice cream. I moved slow, steady. No one saw the storm brewing inside me. Their car was gone. Not even a note left behind. I hired a taxi with the last cash I had in my wallet. The driver, a man with kind eyes, asked where to. I gave him my home address. Flagstaff suburbs. He whistled when he heard it, 40 miles. I nodded. Every mile gave me time to think. By the time I pushed my front door open, the house smelled stale. My suitcase wasn't there. My family had taken it, maybe thinking I wouldn't need it again. I sat at the kitchen table, breathing in the silence. My pulse slowed. The old clock ticked like it had been waiting for me. On the counter, a note lay under the fruit bowl. Claire's handwriting. Dad, we'll pick you up later this week. Try to stay out of trouble. Stay out of trouble. As if I were a child. As if nearly dying in their car was me making mischief. I folded the note once, twice, until it was no bigger than a coin. Then I lit a match and watched it curl into ash in the sink. They thought I was weak. They thought the canyon would be the last straw, that I'd give up, fade away, stop asking for anything. But they forgot who I was before the years bent my back. I wasn't always a ghost in their rearview mirror. I was a builder, a fighter, a man who knew how to make things move without raising his voice. And now I had work to do. The first step was information. Revenge isn't fire, it's ice. It has to be cold, measured, exact. The next morning, I took the city bus to the county records office. The clerks barely looked at me. Just another old man clutching a folder. But I knew what to ask for. Property deeds, car titles, loan agreements. Every scrap of paper tied to my son's name. By noon, I knew more about Peter's life than he'd ever admitted over dinner. The house was refinanced twice. Maxed out mortgage. His business, a landscaping company he bragged about endlessly, was running on fumes. He was 3 months behind on payments for that shiny SUV he used to drive me into the desert. Claire's name was all over the credit lines. Department store cards, vacations, home decor. Every signature a nail in their own coffin. And Ethan, my grandson, the one who smirked at me in the car, he had a juvenile record. Not sealed. Graffiti, shoplifting, one drunk driving scare swept under the rug by Peter's connections. The clerk at the desk lowered her voice when she handed me the copies. This family messy. I nodded. Messy enough, I whispered. I left with a folder heavier than it looked. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and spread the papers out like playing cards. Debts, secrets, weaknesses. My family thought I was a frail old man chasing dreams. They forgot that even frail hands can still pull strings. But I needed proof they'd gone too far. Not just heat stroke and abandonment. Something undeniable. So I tested them. I called Peter the next morning. My voice was steady, flat. I ended up at the clinic after yesterday. Nearly didn't make it. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Dad, you're exaggerating. You've always been dramatic. Claire said you looked fine when we left. You locked the car. We didn't lock anything. Must have been a malfunction. Don't blame us for your confusion. You're old. Things slip. Old. Things slip. I have the ranger's name, I said softly. He pulled me out. He wrote a report. That made him stumble. Look, Dad, don't make this a big deal. We'll swing by later this week, smooth it out. Just don't talk to anyone about it. Okay. I didn't answer. I let the silence choke him. Then I hung up. It was exactly what I needed. Proof that he'd lie, even with my life nearly ended. Proof that to him, the truth was just something to be smoothed out. The next step was small. A taste. I called the SUV financing office. Asked them politely to send duplicate statements to my address. After all, I was his co-signer back in the day. The woman checked the system. Yes, Mr. Thomas, we can do that. By evening, I held a statement showing 3 missed payments and a repossession warning stamped in red. I didn't touch it. Not yet. I just placed it in my folder. Then I pulled out a second sheet. A loan Peter had taken years ago, one I had quietly co-signed to help him buy his first equipment truck. He probably thought I'd forgotten. But the bank still remembered. And as long as my name was there, so was my power. The canyon had nearly been my grave. Now it would be my compass. They left me to burn under its sun, and I would use that same heat to strip them bare. I closed the folder, locked it in my desk, and whispered into the empty room. You tried to bury me in silence. But you're the one standing on the edge. The clock ticked. The house was still. But inside, a plan was already alive, cold, and patient. And the first real move was coming. Revenge doesn't start with a roar. It starts with a whisper. A small shift, quiet enough that they think it's coincidence, until the pattern grows teeth. 2 days after I left the clinic, I mailed the first envelope. Plain white, no return address. Inside, a copy of Peter's delinquent SUV statement. Past due in bold, 3 months behind, repossession warning. I didn't include a note. I didn't need to. Silence can say plenty. I slipped it into the mailbox on my morning walk, the same way I used to slip lunch notes into Peter's backpack when he was a boy. Back then, the notes said, "You'll do fine on your test," or "Don't forget your gloves, it's cold out." Now they said, without words, I know. By the next evening, Claire called. Her voice was sharp, brittle. "Dad, did you do something with our mail?" I let the question hang. "What kind of mail?" "You know what I mean," she snapped. "The bank. The SUV. We got a letter today. That's private." Private. My voice was calm, almost gentle. So was leaving me in a locked car to cook. She sputtered. I heard Peter in the background, muttering, "Hang up. Don't engage." I said one last thing before she clicked off. This is just the beginning. They didn't call back. The next move was Ethan, my grandson. He thought I didn't know about his record, about the spray paint on the middle school walls, about the shoplifting charges that disappeared after Peter pulled favors with an old friend in city council. But I knew. One quiet afternoon, I drove my old truck. Yes, the one they said I was too frail to handle, downtown. Parked near the courthouse. Carried a manila envelope inside. In it, copies of Ethan's juvenile record, plus a typed note signed with one sentence. Consider this if he applies for scholarships or jobs. I left it with the clerk in a sealed file request. Not to ruin him yet, but to remind the world that records don't vanish just because parents pretend they do. I wanted Peter to sweat. Wanted him to wonder who still remembered. By Friday, the whispers started. Claire's neighbor, an old church friend of mine, called me. "Tom, everything okay over there? Heard shouting last night. Sounded bad." I smiled into the receiver. "I'm just fine, Mary. Just fine." That night, I sat at my kitchen table and laid out the next card. The landscaping business. He loved bragging about it. His trucks with vinyl logos. His team of young men hauling gravel and planting shrubs in the heat. What he never bragged about were the unpaid invoices. The contracts he signed but never finished. The suppliers he stiffed. I knew where the bodies were buried. Literally. He once stored pallets of pavers behind my barn for 3 months without paying a dime for them. Claimed he'd settle the bill later. He never did. So, I made a call. Quiet, casual. To the supplier. "This is Tom. Remember those pallets? You might want to review your records. He still owes you." The man on the other end cursed. That explains why he's been dodging my calls. By the weekend, Peter had 2 angry suppliers knocking at his door, demanding payment. I imagined the scene. Claire in her silk robe, shouting about embarrassment, Ethan slamming his door, Peter sweating, trying to calm them with promises he couldn't keep. I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. Instead, I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea, the desert breeze brushing my face, and thought of the canyon. Thought of how close I came to never breathing again, and felt the calm of a man taking back pieces of himself one by one. Sunday afternoon, Peter showed up at my house. He didn't knock. He barged in, face flushed, jaw tight. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. I looked up from the crossword at my table. "Good to see you too, son. Don't play games with me. The mail, the suppliers, people are saying things. You think you can just think. I cut in. I don't need to think, Peter. I know. I know every debt, every lie, every favor you pulled to cover Ethan's mess. I know about the mortgage, the business, the cards. I know more about your life than you do. His face drained of color. For the first time in years, he looked small. You don't understand, he muttered. Oh, I do, I said, my voice cold. Better than you realize. You left me to die in a car. For convenience. For speed. And you thought I'd forget. You were wrong. He slammed his fist on the table. You can't do this. Your family. I leaned forward, eyes sharp. Exactly. And that's why you should be afraid. Because only family knows where the cracks are. For a moment, I thought he'd swing at me. But he didn't. He just stood there, fists shaking, before storming out, slamming the door so hard the clock on the wall rattled. The silence after was sweet, like a canyon breeze. That night, I wrote one line in my journal. Test passed. They're scared, but fear was just the appetizer. The real hunger, the revenge that would taste like justice, was still coming. Fear changes people. It doesn't make them quiet, it makes them loud. By the middle of the week, my family was shouting louder than cicadas in July. I didn't hear it from them directly. I heard it from neighbors, from church folk, from the man at the diner who leaned across the counter and said, "Your boy looked red as a beet yelling at his wife last night. Everything all right?" I sipped my coffee and answered, "Never better." But inside, I knew something was breaking. Not in me, in them. Claire cracked first. It was Thursday evening when she came to my house alone, pulled up in that shiny SUV that was already half belonging to the bank. She wore sunglasses even though the sun was low, and when she walked in, she didn't bark like usual. She whispered, "Tom," she said, shutting the door behind her. "We need to talk." I studied her carefully. She wasn't here for kindness. She was here because survival had changed its shape. She sat at the kitchen table, smoothing her skirt. "Peter's making a mess of things. The suppliers, the debts, you've stirred it all up. And now he's lashing out at me. At the kids. He drinks more at night. Shouts. He's not himself." I let her words hang in the air. Then I said, "Not himself? Or finally himself?" Her lips tightened. She didn't argue. "What do you want, Claire?" I asked. She leaned closer. "If you're trying to ruin him, fine. But don't ruin me with him. I've got my own investments." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside, photocopies of Peter's emails. Private ones. Promises to investors he never kept. Forged signatures on contracts. Even an account statement showing transfers to a private gambling site. I whistled low. "Where'd you get these?" She smiled without warmth. "A wife always knows the passwords." I tapped the papers. "And what do you want in return?" "Protection," she said quickly. "If he goes down, I want a way out. You have connections, don't you? Papers, accounts, leverage. I want a piece of that. Just enough to keep me safe." Her words tasted like betrayal, but not against me, against him. My son. Her husband. She was already sharpening knives behind his back. I didn't give her an answer. I just said, "Leave the papers. I'll think." When she left, I sat staring at the envelope a long while. Once, I would have burned it. Protected my boy no matter what. But that boy had locked me in a car to bake. He wasn't my boy anymore. And Claire, well, she wasn't my ally. She was just the first rat trying to leap from a sinking ship. Still, rats can carry useful scraps in their teeth. The next day, I tested Ethan. My grandson. He was mowing my lawn. Part of his court-ordered community service, though he acted like it was charity. He kept glancing at his phone, sweating under the sun. I walked out with 2 lemonades. Set one on the porch rail. "You thirsty?" He nodded, gulping it down. Then I said, "You know your dad's in trouble." He stiffened. "What do you mean?" "Money trouble. Business trouble. Trouble that could spill onto you if you're not careful." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Dad always gets out of it. He knows people." "Not anymore," I said quietly. "People are turning. Even your mom." That got him. He blinked, frowning. "Mom." I shrugged, letting the word sit like a stone dropped in water. Ripple spreading. He didn't say anything else. Just finished mowing in silence. But I saw it, the doubt creeping in. The seed planted. That night, I pulled Claire's papers back out. spread them beside the bank statements, the juvenile records, the contracts. A mosaic of greed, lies, and cracks. My family thought they were untouchable, but I held the proof they were already bleeding from the inside. Still, something gnawed at me. Doubt. Not about revenge. I was certain of that, but about whether I could stomach what came next. I thought of my wife. Would she have wanted me to fight this dirty? To turn children against parents, spouses against each other? Then I remembered the heat of that car. The way my chest burned, the way their laughter carried as they walked away. No, this wasn't about cruelty. This was about balance. And balance required a push. The push came sooner than I expected. On Saturday morning, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into my driveway. A deputy stepped out, adjusting his hat. "Mr. Tom." "Yes, sir." He looked almost embarrassed. "Got a report of elder neglect. Anonymous tip. Said your family left you in a dangerous situation. We're obligated to check in." For a moment, I just stared. Then a slow smile crept over me. The ranger. Or maybe Claire. Someone had spoken. The deputy scribbled notes as I told him the truth. Locked in the car, heat stroke, clinic. His jaw tightened. "That's serious, Mr. Tom. Real serious." He handed me a card. "If you'd like to file charges, we'll help." I didn't take it right away. I let it hang between us. Then I slipped it into my shirt pocket. "I'll think about it." When he left, I stood on the porch, the sun high, the cicadas loud. My family had wanted me erased, hidden in silence. But now the law itself had walked up my driveway, asking if I wanted to make noise. And inside, on my table, lay the papers that could turn noise into thunder. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not victory, not yet, but power. And I knew Claire's betrayal was just the start. More would come, because pressure doesn't just break families. It shatters them. The sheriff's card burned a hole in my pocket. Every time I sat down, every time I reached for my wallet, my fingers brushed it. A reminder, I wasn't voiceless. The law wasn't on their side anymore. It was waiting on mine. But I didn't rush. Revenge is ruined when it's rushed. It has to cook slow, like stew left to simmer until the flavor seeps deep. I waited 3 days. Let them sweat. Let them wonder if the deputy had reported back to me. Let Claire worry if her anonymous tip had been traced. Let Peter pace holes in the carpet. On the 4th morning, I made my move. I walked into the sheriff's office with Claire's envelope under my arm. The deputy recognized me immediately. "Mr. Tom, you here to follow up?" I nodded. "I'd like this filed. For the record." He led me to a small room with a humming fan and a coffee stain on the desk. I laid the papers out like evidence in a trial. The forged contracts, the gambling transfers, the delinquent statements. My account of the day they locked me in the SUV. The deputy's eyes widened. "This is substantial." "It's truth," I said, flat and steady. By the time I left, an official report was in motion. Words that couldn't be erased. My family wasn't just cruel anymore. They were under investigation. I didn't call to warn them. I wanted them to find out the hard way. And they did. That evening, Peter stormed into my yard, face twisted, sweat darkening his collar. "What the hell have you done?" he bellowed. Neighbors peeked through blinds. A dog barked 2 houses down. I leaned on the porch rail, calm as stone. I filed truth. If truth burns you, that's not my fire, it's your lies. "You've ruined me." His voice cracked. The sheriff asked about my business, about my accounts. "Do you know what this means?" "Yes," I said simply. He glared, fists balled, then pointed a trembling finger at me. "You'll regret this, Dad." I stepped down from the porch, close enough for him to see the steady beat in my temple. "No, Peter. You will." He flinched. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not annoyance. Not irritation. Real fear. When he left, tires squealing down the street, I exhaled slowly. The canyon was opening beneath him, and I was the one nudging him toward the rim. But I wasn't done. The next day, I called the suppliers again. "This is Tom. Did you hear about the sheriff's report?" One of them swore. "So it's true. He's under investigation?" "That's what I hear." "Then he's finished. We're taking him to court." Exactly what I wanted. By Friday, lawsuits were circling. Peter's landscaping business was a house of cards already. Now it was shaking in the wind. He tried to plug the holes with charm, calling in favors, promising payments he didn't have. But charm dries up fast when creditors smell blood. Meanwhile, I planted another seed. I left Ethan a note. Just 4 words, slipped under his car windshield. Your dad will fall. No signature. No explanation. Just the truth he already suspected. That evening, I caught him standing across the street, staring at my house. His jaw tight, his hands stuffed in his hoodie. He didn't come closer, but he didn't look away either. The next morning, Claire called again. This time, her voice was low, almost trembling. Tom, it's worse than you know. He's hiding money. He's been lying to me for years. Please, you have to believe me. I almost laughed. Believe her? I didn't need belief. I had proof. Still, I let her talk. She spilled more than I expected. Bank accounts in her name she hadn't known about. Debts he'd hidden. Even whispers of another woman he'd been meeting for business. Her betrayal wasn't out of loyalty to me. It was out of desperation. She knew Peter was sinking, and she was scrambling for a life raft. I let her words pour into my notebook. Every date, every number, every name. When she finally paused, I said, Claire, you think I'm saving you. I'm not. I'm just listening. That's all I owe you. She gasped softly, realizing too late she'd given me ammunition for free. I hung up. By Sunday, the storm had grown teeth. A deputy knocked again, this time with more questions. Lawsuits had already reached the courthouse. Suppliers demanding payment. Neighbors whispering about gambling. Even Ethan had been called to give a statement about the day at the canyon. Peter's fortress of pride was crumbling, brick by brick. I stood in my kitchen, papers spread across the table, and thought, this isn't even the peak. This is just the climb. Because the canyon doesn't show its depth all at once. You edge closer, step by step, until the ground vanishes beneath your feet. And Peter was one step away from the drop. There's a moment when whispers turn into thunder. For Peter, that moment came on a Tuesday morning, inside the glass doors of the local bank. I wasn't there, but word travels fast in small towns. People talked at the diner, at the gas station, in line at the pharmacy. You hear about Peter? They whispered. Got denied in front of everyone. Denied what? A loan. His last lifeline. He had walked in confident, shoulders square, tie strangling his neck in the summer heat. Walked out pale, sweating, muttering at Claire as if it were her fault. The banker had told him no. Too risky. Too many lawsuits pending. Sheriff's report still open. Credit stained like red clay after rain. By the time I heard, I didn't feel triumph. Not yet. Just inevitability. That night, Claire came again. No sunglasses this time. No skirt smoothed nervously. Just exhaustion. He's unraveling, Tom, she said, standing in my doorway. He blames me. He blames you. He even blames the kids. Maybe blame finally found its home, I answered. She flinched. Do you have to be so cold? Yes, I said simply. She sat at the table, head in her hands. He's talking about selling the house. But there's no equity. We'll lose everything. I poured her water, watched her sip with shaking hands. And then, I slid her own words back at her. You told me he's been hiding accounts, meeting other women, forging signatures. Why protect him now? Her eyes flicked up, sharp with guilt. She hadn't expected me to keep every detail. I'm not protecting him, she whispered. I'm protecting myself. Of course she was. Rats don't swim to save the ship. They swim to save their own skins. When she left, I opened my drawer and pulled out the sheriff's card again. My thumb traced the embossed letters. One call, and the whole house of cards would tumble faster. But I wasn't ready to end it. Not yet. I wanted the world to see. The next morning, I paid a visit to the local paper. Small office, dusty blinds, coffee brewing weak in the corner. The editor, a woman named Susan, had known me for decades. She looked surprised when I laid the folder on her desk. What's this? She asked. Truth, I said. She skimmed the documents, lawsuits, gambling receipts, even the sheriff's initial report. Her brows rose higher with each page. Tom, if I print this, it'll destroy him. I leaned back, steady, then print it. By Thursday, the headline hit the front page. Local businessman under fire. Allegations of fraud, neglect surface. The photo beneath showed Peter, red-faced, trying to shield his face from the camera as he left the courthouse. Claire beside him, lips thin, eyes cast down. I folded the paper neatly and set it on my porch table. Sipped my coffee slow while neighbors walked by, some pausing to wave, some just shaking their heads. Humiliation is a canyon of its own. And Peter had just fallen in. That evening, Ethan appeared. No smirk this time. No earbuds. Just a pale face and shaking hands. "Grandpa," he said, voice low, "is it true? About Dad?" I studied him. My grandson. The boy who once laughed at me for dreaming too big. "Yes," I said. "It's true." His eyes watered, but he didn't cry. "He says it's your fault." I leaned forward. "No, Ethan. It's his fault. He made choices. I just stopped covering them up." He swallowed hard, then whispered, "What happens to us?" For a flicker of a second, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who used to bring me drawings of cowboys and rockets. Not the arrogant teen, but the child who still believed adults were giants who'd keep him safe. "You'll figure it out," I said, my voice steady. "But don't make the same mistakes." He nodded, silent. When he left, his shoulders slumped like a man twice his age. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the yard under the stars, thinking of my wife. Would she have approved? Would she have told me to stop before the point of no return? The memory of the car's suffocating heat answered for me. No, she'd say. Don't stop. Not when justice is this close. The next day, the bank repossessed the SUV. They towed it right out of Peter's driveway, neighbors watching through curtains. Claire screamed at the driver, but it didn't matter. Papers were signed. Debt was debt. By evening, I had another envelope ready. This one I didn't mail. I hand-delivered it. I stood on their porch, knocked, and waited. Claire opened the door, eyes swollen from crying. Peter appeared behind her, rage twisting his face. "What do you want?" he spat. I handed him the envelope. "Proof," I said. He tore it open. Inside were copies of his forged contracts, highlighted in yellow, with dates circled. Evidence Claire herself had given me. He started, but I cut him off. "You locked me in a car and left me to die," I said, my voice ablade. "This is me locking you in. Only difference is, you'll still be breathing when it's done." His face turned the color of clay. Claire stepped back, pressing her lips tight. I turned and walked away before he could speak. Back at my house, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees. My chest ached, not from weakness but from the weight of finality. This wasn't just petty vengeance anymore. This was ruin. And the ruin was only beginning. The canyon has a silence to it. Stand at the rim and you'll hear wind, maybe footsteps, maybe a camera click, but beneath it all, there's a hush. A hush that says, one wrong step, and you're gone. That's where my family stood now, right at the rim. The article had spread faster than I imagined. Small-town gossip travels quicker than wildfire, and Peter's name was the driest brush. At the diner, folks passed the paper around like a deck of cards. At church, Claire couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Ethan stopped showing up at school for 2 days straight. But humiliation wasn't enough. Not yet. They had left me in the heat to die. I wanted them to feel the kind of suffocation that leaves you clawing for air. So I set the final trap. I called the sheriff again. Calm, polite. "I'd like to add to my statement," I said. He agreed to meet me the next morning. I slid a folder across his desk, the same one Claire had handed me weeks ago. Forged signatures. Wire transfers. Names of investors cheated. The deputy looked at me long and hard. "You realize this isn't just fraud. It borders on criminal." "I realize," I said. By afternoon, Peter was served. Right there in front of his neighbors. 2 deputies walking up his driveway with papers in hand. Claire screamed at them. Peter shouted until his voice cracked. But papers are heavier than pride. They still handed them over. The canyon edge had crumbled beneath his feet. That evening, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't Claire. It wasn't Ethan. It was Peter himself, wild-eyed, sweat dripping down his temples. "You did this," he hissed. I didn't argue. "You've ruined me. My business, my marriage, my kids." "You ruined yourself," I said coldly. His hands shook. For a moment, I thought he might lunge at me. But then his knees buckled, and he sank into the chair across from me like a man twice my age. "Why, Dad?" His voice cracked, small, almost childlike. Why couldn't you just let it go? I leaned forward, every word sharp. Because you tried to let me go. You locked me in that car and walked away. You wanted me gone so your vacation would be simpler. But you forgot something. I'm not a dog you can leave in the heat. I'm the man who raised you. And I don't forget. He covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. Whether it was rage or despair, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. Finally, he stood. This isn't over. Yes, I said softly. It is. When he left, I sat alone in the silence. My chest ached again, but not from weakness. From the weight of a lifetime. Of raising a boy who'd grown into the kind of man who would abandon his father at the edge of his dream. I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity doesn't erase betrayal. The next morning, more cracks formed. Ethan showed up on my porch, hood pulled low, eyes red. They're fighting all the time, he muttered. Mom says she wants out. Dad says it's your fault. I don't know who to believe anymore. Believe what you saw, I told him. He looked at me, eyes searching, desperate. Grandpa, why are you doing this? I didn't sugarcoat it. Because I gave your father everything, and he gave me nothing but silence. Because he needed to learn that some debts don't disappear. And because you all need to understand, love isn't a one-way road. He swallowed hard, then left without another word. By the end of the week, Peter's business license was suspended pending investigation. His phone calls went unanswered. Suppliers lined up to sue. His name, once spoken with respect, was now spit like sour milk. Claire packed a suitcase and drove off one afternoon. Didn't even hide it. I watched her SUV crawl down the street, neighbors whispering behind blinds. She didn't look back. That night, Peter stood alone on his porch, a bottle dangling from his hand. I watched from across the street, hidden by my own shadows. He shouted once into the dark, a sound more animal than human. Then he collapsed into a chair and sat there, head in his hands, until the sun rose. The silence of the canyon had found him. And me? I wasn't finished. I still had one more card to play. One strike left that would cut deeper than lawsuits, deeper than shame. Something final. Something they would never crawl back from. Because revenge isn't complete until the last echo dies. And mine was coming. The canyon doesn't kill with one step. It kills with gravity. Slow at first, then all at once. That was what I saved for the end. The lawsuits were already circling. The sheriff had enough to build a case. Claire had left. Ethan was silent. Neighbors whispered. Peter's world was cracked from every angle. But cracks still hold. What I wanted was collapse. So I gave one last push. The will. For years, my estate had been simple. The house, the land, the savings. All to Peter and the kids. I never questioned it. That's what fathers do, right? Pass it down, let the next generation live easier. Even after my wife died, I left it untouched. Because family, I thought, was forever. But family locked me in a car to die. So one Monday morning, I walked into the lawyer's office. Old building, walls lined with dusty law books. The receptionist barely glanced up. When the lawyer saw me, he smiled. Tom, I heard about the business with your son. Ugly mess. I laid the folder down. I want to change my will. By the time I walked out, Peter's name was gone. Claire's too. Even Ethan's. Every line that once belonged to them now pointed elsewhere. To charities, to a veterans fund, to a scholarship in my wife's name for kids who'd never see the Grand Canyon otherwise. And just for spite, I left $1 to Peter. One crisp bill, framed in legal ink. Enough that the lawyer had to call his name at the reading. Not enough to save him. 2 weeks later, the sheriff's office called. Charges filed. Fraud, misrepresentation, possible elder neglect. Peter was summoned to court. The paper printed his name again, this time under the words arraignment scheduled. I kept that clipping folded in my pocket. Not to gloat, just to remind myself it was real. When the day came, I sat in the back row of the courthouse. Didn't say a word. Just watched. Peter shuffled in wearing a wrinkled suit, eyes hollow, jaw clenched. Claire wasn't beside him. Ethan wasn't either. Just him. Alone. When the judge asked for his plea, his voice cracked. Not guilty. The gallery snickered. Even the bailiff looked away, hiding a smirk. For a moment, his eyes searched the room. And he found me. sitting straight, cane resting against my knee. He glared. I didn't blink. The hearing was short. Papers filed. Dates set. When it ended, he walked past me, close enough that I could smell the sweat on his collar. He leaned in, hissed under his breath, "I'll never forgive you." I whispered back, calm as stone, "You don't have to." Outside, reporters swarmed. Questions flew. Cameras flashed. His name was ash on every tongue. By the time he pushed through the crowd, shoulders hunched, he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. That night, I sat on my porch. The desert wind carried the cicadas' endless song. I lit a candle, lavender, my wife's favorite, and placed it beside her photo. "I saw the canyon today," I whispered. "Not the real one. Not yet. But the canyon inside me. The place where silence falls and pride shatters." And I smiled. Because revenge wasn't fire or rage. It was silence. It was gravity. A week later, the lawyer called Peter and the kids to read the will. I wasn't there, but I imagined the scene. The lawyer flipping pages, reading out numbers, names, bequests. Then pausing. "To my son Peter, I leave $1. I pictured the look on his face. The silence in the room. The weight of every choice he'd made crashing down all at once. That night, I finally drove myself to the canyon. Alone. No family. No noise. Just me, my truck, and the road that cut through the desert like a scar. When I reached the rim, the air was cooler than I'd imagined. The wind brushed my face like a hand I once knew. The sun dipped low, painting the cliffs in gold and crimson. I stood there a long while, cane in one hand, hat in the other, breathing deep. And I whispered to her, the wife who never got to stand here with me. We made it. Below me stretched the vast silence of the canyon. Endless, unforgiving, eternal, just like my revenge. I left them their lives, but nothing else. I gave them $1. I kept the canyon for myself.